Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's Torah study. Today is Wednesday, June 16th, and we are learning about the Talmud. We started this discussion last week, actually, a discussion with regards to the next world, the world to come. You know, as Jewish people, we believe, we believe in the world to come as a fundamental principle, which is based on the fact that our souls are a piece of God. And just like God is eternal forever, so too we are also eternal and forever. The question is where we go. Again, this is not just a religious value, it's a scientific principle, which is the law of the conservation of energy. That no energy is ever lost or diffused. It just is transformed into another form. Energy cannot be made or destroyed. It just gets transferred. And if this is true of other kinds of energy, like mechanical and electrical energy and kinetic energy and all sorts of other energies, then how much more so is it true of life itself? It would simply be unscientific to say that there is no world, no life after this world. Just like two children in the womb. Imagine two children in the womb. One of them believes in a world beyond the womb, and the other one does not believe in a world beyond the womb. So the child who believes in the world beyond the womb is ridiculed by the non-believer who says, have you ever seen this world beyond the womb? Has anybody ever come back? This world that you talk about? Besides, have you ever seen this entity called mother that you talk about? There's no such thing as mother. There's no such thing as a world. This is it. After a while, you just get flushed out of here and it's all over. You're dead, right? We, of course, understand the absurdity of that position. So applying that same principle, the metaphor would be applicable, obviously, to discussion right now, which is the Talmud's discussion about the world that comes after this world. So the fact that you haven't been there doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. The fact that nobody's come back from there doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. We are very familiar with one-way streets when it comes from one world to another world, as we see from the womb to this world. How much more so when it comes from this world to a spiritual entity. Today's Torah study has been lovingly sponsored by Stephanie and Jay Marmer in loving memory of Max Marmer. That's Jay's father on the occasion of his yahrzeit. His name is Zalman Mordechai Ben Aryeh. May his soul be elevated in Gan Eden, in heaven, in the merit of today's Torah study. How appropriate that we're learning about Gan Eden. We're learning about heaven on the very day that we are dedicating to the memory of Max Marmer, who is joining us, hopefully, from heaven in today's Torah study, connecting worlds, bridging worlds between Stephanie and Jay. I think party on the Bima, I think. Between Stephanie and Jay and their father up in heaven. So we're studying Talmud. Today we're learning the Black Talmud book. It's called the Ein Yaakov, if you have it. And we are on page 248. So last week we learned a beautiful story. It's the orange ones. Last week we learned a beautiful story. Good morning, Terry. Good morning, Keith. And good morning, Steve. Last week we learned a beautiful story. We learned a story, good morning, Winston, about the two souls that were in the cemetery that were wandering around trying to work out what was going on in the in this world. They wanted to find out what was going on in this world. And from there, the Talmud derived that we learn that the deceased do know about what goes on in this world. So they are aware and they do know what's going on in this world. Let's carry on the Talmud from there. We're on the top of page 248. Where the Talmud tries to reject this proof that we learned last week, that the deceased are aware of what's going on in this world. Why is that not a proof? And here's the reason. Perhaps another person died in the meantime. Because what happened was, at the end of that story, was that in the third year, when the rabbi, went to the graveyard to spend the Rosh Hashanah night there, and he was waiting to hear the souls talking to each other. The souls were talking to each other, and they said, let's go and travel the world to find out what's going on in the world. And they said, no, we can't go because people on earth have overheard our conversation. So in other words, there's informers. People have spread the word of our conversation, so it's not a good idea to go back, to be talking aloud, right? So from there, the Talmud derived that they had heard that there was a conversation, that basically the news had broke about their conversation the previous year, right? So if the Talmud says perhaps another person died in the meantime and went and told them about it. So in other words, it's not a proof that the deceased know what's going on in this world. Maybe somebody who was alive during the time of the story, when the news broke on earth, that person heard the news on earth, then he died and he brought the news up to heaven, and that's how they know in heaven that the news had broken, right? But with that being told, it is possible that they do not know what's being spoken by the living. And that's why the Talmud needs to bring us a different proof. Come learn a proof from the following incident. We're going to try to bring another proof to derive a source for how the deceased know what's going on in this world. Zeiri entrusted money to his landlady. So Zeiri gave some money to his landladies for safekeeping. By the time he went and returned from the academy, she had died, and Zeiri did not know where she had put his money. He went after her to the courtyard of death. He went to the cemetery and he asked her. He said, "Ma'am, sorry for your loss, but hey, where's my money?" She replied. Now, she replied, I guess, in the cemetery. It's interesting how he heard her reply. She replied, "Go take it from under the pivot of the door in such and such a place." She basically said, "It's underneath. I buried it somewhere under the door." And she added, "Also, by the way, if you're already here, tell my mother to send me my comb and my cosmetic tube with so-and-so who is dying and is coming to be buried here tomorrow." What an interesting story, right? So basically, the guy was looking for his money. He went to the cemetery. He asked her, "Where is my money?" She said, she told him exactly where it's buried. And then she told him also to tell her mother to send her a comb and a cosmetic tube with so-and-so who is dying, as if they're able to bring a comb and a cosmetic tube, like a toothbrush and a comb, right? Or toothpaste, as if they're able to bring it over. And she knew it. She knew apparently that this person was going to be dying and buried tomorrow. So what's going on? So let's just conclude the story. That we see that she knew that another person was sick and dying. So thus we see that they do know about worldly affairs, right? Before we analyze the story, right? So just before we analyze the story, let's just discuss what's the Talmud trying to say. That indeed the deceased know who's going to die. They know what's going on earth. They get the memo. So in the commentary, we say, certainly she had no need for cosmetics in the afterlife. She used this as an expression of her sorrow for having died young. That's what Rashi comments. Those who die mourn the lost opportunity of life, and they pass this message to those still alive so that they should appreciate what they have while they still can. Right? So that was a metaphor when she says, "Send me my comb and my cosmetics tube." She passed away young. She wanted a mom. Obviously, her mother is still alive, so she must have been pretty young. Where she says, "I feel bad, and maybe you should take advantage of the time that you still have left." But clearly, she knew that this person was dying. Now, how she communicated this to Zeiri, whether it was through what we call a bat kol, a heavenly voice, or maybe she came to him in a dream, which is a common way that the deceased will come back to the living. But now the Gemara rejects this proof as well. Perhaps the angel Duma, there's an angel called Duma, who is appointed over the souls of the dead, announced to the dead beforehand that this person was coming the next day, and that is how she knew about it. In other words, there's a special angel, Duma, whose job it is to oversee the dead. And maybe he passed on the memo, and an angel would be more likely to know about what's going on in this world more than the deceased. He is more likely to know what's going on in this world more than the deceased, because that's the job of angels. Their jobs is to go down to this earth and do all sorts of missions for God Almighty. But the deceased are supposed to be up in heaven. So maybe he was the one that passed on the message, and maybe we're stuck again without a proper proof as to how we know that the deceased actually know on their own terms about what's going on earth. Now, the fact that Duma told them, if Duma, the angel over the deceased, told the deceased about what's going on this earth, then that alone is already an answer, an explanation to us to give us some context. That indeed the deceased know what's going on in this earth. Whether they know it of their own or whether they know it through the angel, no. We can argue about that. But what's the difference? Either way, they get the memo. So what's the problem? Right? I guess we're trying to work out only to what extent They're aware, right? Do they have like their own CNN breaking news alerts? They have the 8 p.m. news every night to say what's going on, or are they hearing it from other sources? But either way, they get the memo.
When I'm reading, when I'm listening,
Yeah.
they're all in the cemetery. So they don't wander outside.
They're based in the cemetery, which is why it's important to be buried in a Jewish cemetery, because if a person's not buried, then their soul is lost and wandering. But they have a base. When you have a burial plot, then the lowest part of the soul is based over there at the cemetery, which is why when we visit the graves of our loved ones, it's not just a sentimental visit; it's actually connecting to their souls through the portal. Yeah. Good. I'd like to welcome Marty from Manhattan, which is great because Marty was with us for the past few months for the whole season. And it's nice to know that Marty's jumped over to the other side. Marty, you're on the other side. Look at that. You were here with us last week, and now you're on the other side.
Tell him we miss him. We're upset we can't hear his comments.
Keith says we miss you, and we're upset. And he's upset that we don't hear your comments. I'm looking at your seat over here. But I think it's a very good metaphor. Just like Marty's on the other side, and everybody else is on the other side. And you still know what's going on with us. Right? Maybe we can't see you, but you see us. You see me at least. Same thing with the souls on the other side in the next world. We don't see them, but they see us. It's like a brilliant metaphor to study this Talmud over social media. Did I say hello to you, Rob Berger in Chicago and Stephanie? I'm not sure if I even said hello to everybody. Howard and Susan and Boynton and Rob in Chicago was with us for many months, and Stephanie, whose father-in-law is being elevated, his soul is being elevated today from the other side. We're literally like creating a bridge by Stephanie and Jay sponsoring today's Torah study. They're creating a bridge between this world and the next world, and he's definitely getting the memo that Torah study is being studied by all of us. We have like 20 people here between all the platforms that we're studying Torah together. 2 million of people studying Torah High Lane and Winston. And it's amazing that we're studying together, and he's joining to make the minyan. Max, who knows who else is bringing with him to study with us. Now we got to go to a third proof, folks. It's very quiet. No questions I'm getting here on Facebook and YouTube. Seems like everybody's either pensive or you think I'm out of my mind. I'm not sure which one. I'm going to go for the first option. Maybe you're just being pensive. Marty says, miss being with us in the flesh. That's right. In the flesh. See, you can be with us in spirit, even though you're not in the flesh. Isn't that amazing? That's what the souls are with us. They're with us in spirit, but not in flesh. Terry, where are the higher levels of departed souls? Isn't it possible that they're aware of what's going on and are able to be in many places at once? The answer is absolutely yes. The higher levels of the souls are certainly able to be in many places at the same time, because they're not tethered to the physical body. They're not stuck to be with a physical body somewhere. And therefore, they're able to roam freely. Unless, by the way, we learned last week, unless they were buried in a way which prolonged the body's decomposition. When we learned about the woman who was buried in a mat of reeds, there was like some sort of preserving, like a mausoleum or a embalming process, which would have slowly slowed down the process of decomposition. In that case, she was stuck. She couldn't travel. But yeah, we learned over here in the Talmud, Terry, absolutely. We learned here that the souls are roaming freely and they're able to go everywhere. So we just did a wedding on Sunday night in New York, and I announced 3 generations of the soul of ancestors are joining us right here at the wedding. What do you think? Right? So they get the invitation, they come, for sure. Rob, good to return today after root canal yesterday. Rob, you leave Palm Beach Gardens for like 2 weeks and you're already having root canal. I think it's good for your health to be in Palm Beach Gardens. I hope you're well, Rob. And Lakewood, David Rosen has been up since 3:30 a.m. He did a bris for Muncie. Fantastic. Good for you. Mazel tov. And Terry, David, can you send some bagels over to Palm Beach Gardens? You'd like to do delivery as well from Lakewood? Would that be nice to have a nice bagel breakfast here from Foursquare? I think it's called Foursquare in Lakewood. Terry, so why are we surprised that they know what's going on? Well, this is how we know it from here. We know it, Terry, from here. This is the Talmud. The Talmud, listen, comes 2,000 years ago. You know what I mean? The Talmud comes from 2,000 years ago. So we know it's from Sinaitic tradition. We're just learning it now, but we've known this for a very long time. Okay. Marty and Rob agree that Palm Beach Gardens is good for your health. That's fantastic. I have to tell you, I think I mentioned this a few days ago. I met a Jew who we haven't seen since the beginning of the pandemic, and he looked like he was like just completely like unhealthy. And I felt like the shul was good for his health. Just being here was good for his health. Oh, David's sending us bagels, God willing. That'd be fantastic. We'd love to have them. Fantastic. David, you're the best. You got good sportsmanship. Love it. Okay, good. We're going to go further. We got another proof. We rejected so far 2 proofs. This is very Talmudic. The proof of the 2 spirits in the cemetery, doing the insider trading. Then the second proof we learned today was about the guy who lost his money. Let's go to the third one. Comes on a proof in the following incident. Shmuel's father was entrusted with orphans' money. Shmuel's father was entrusted with orphans' money. He was like an administrator of a trustee of an orphan's account. When he died, Shmuel was not with him. So he couldn't tell Shmuel where the money was hidden. And now what's going to happen? Who's going to lose out is the orphans, because the orphans are probably 3 years old. Until they grow up, they're even going to know. They might have had millions of dollars entrusted, and it's going to be lost. So people would call Shmuel the son of one who used the orphan's money. They accused Shmuel's father of having stolen the money from the orphans, right? Since they suspected his father of wrongfully using the money. So Shmuel went after his father to the courtyard of death. He went to the cemetery. Now, Shmuel incidentally was a Kohen, and Kohens are not allowed to walk into cemeteries. Right? They can't defile themselves with impurity like the regular Israelites do. So therefore, Shmuel would not have gone into the cemetery. So this would support the view that these stories happened in dreams and not in the actual cemetery. Alternatively, the courtyard of death refers not to a cemetery, but more to a spiritual location. But let's hear what happened. He met the spirits of the dead there, and he said to them, I seek Abba. I'm looking for Abba. Abba means father. Abba. Shmuel's father's name was actually Abba, the son of Abba. Why was he called Abba, the son of Abba? Well, he was probably called after his father's name because his father probably died before he was born. When somebody's father dies before they're born, in many cases, you'll name the child after the father. Right? So his name was Abba bar Abba. They said to him, there are many Abbas here. There's a lot of Abbas up here. What do you mean? Yeah, I'm looking for Joe Smith. I mean, like, seriously? For Moshe Goldberg, right? So Shmuel said to them, I seek Abba, the son of Abba. How many Abbas, the son of Abba, do you have? Right? They said to him, there are also many Abbas, the son of Abbas here. I guess in those days, a lot of fathers died before the children were born. Shmuel then said to them, I seek Abba bar Abba, the father of Shmuel. How many people like that do you have? Where is he? They said to him, oh, now we know what you're talking about. He's gone up to the Heavenly Academy. He's studying now. He's learning. We don't want to disturb him. Meanwhile, Shmuel noticed his friend Levi, who had already died, sitting outside of the circle of the dead. So Levi was kind of like on the outside. That is, the dead appeared to Shmuel to be sitting in a circle outside of their graves. And Levi was like outside of the circle. So Shmuel said to him, why are you sitting outside the circle? Also, why have you not gone up to the Heavenly Academy? Like, why aren't you learning? You're my buddy. So Levi said to him, the reason I've not been admitted to the Heavenly Academy is that they said to me, for the amount of years that you did not go to the academy of Rabbi Ephes, for all the years that you insulted Rabbi Ephes by not going to his classes, thereby causing him distress, we will not admit you into the Heavenly Academy. Wow. So meanwhile, while Shmuel's waiting for his dad to come back from the yeshiva, the Heavenly Academy, he's chatting up with his old friend, Levi. He's like, what's going on? Why are you here? So he said, they won't let me into the academy because all the times that I missed Rabbi Victor's classes, right? Can you imagine? Can you imagine every time you missed the rabbi's classes, the rabbi's sermon, if you slept through a sermon, every time you slept through a sermon, you get banned from the party upstairs, right? Can you imagine? So what happened? Let's see what happened. By the way, when Rav Ephes became head of the academy, Rabbi Chanina Bar Chama, who was a great Torah scholar, and it was not befitting that he should sit as a student before Rav Ephes, remained outside of the study hall. So in other words, what happened was when Rabbi Ephes became the head of the academy, Rabbi Chanina Bar Chama wasn't appropriate that he should sit in front of Rabbi Ephes, right? He was too great to sit as a student. Out of honor for Rabbi Hanina, who was not sitting as a student before Rabbi Ephes, Levi joined him. And I guess that caused distress to Rabbi Ephes. Right? So this explains why Levi was not admitted to the Heavenly Academy. As for why he was not sitting with the other spirits who was beneath him, as one who was fit for the Heavenly Academy to sit with the other spirits who were not fit for the Heavenly Academy. So in other words, he could have been in the Heavenly Academy and now he was outside, so that he didn't want to sit with the guys that weren't admitted. He was sitting on his own, right? So we're going to have to discuss this a little bit more to understand what's going on here. Maybe we'll go a little bit deeper into it. Meanwhile, before we go, let's just finish the story before we go deeper into understanding what Levi did wrong. Meanwhile, Shmuel's father finally arrived. Okay, we're looking for the money. We want to know where the money is. Shmuel said that he was both crying and laughing. Shmuel said to him. So the father was crying and laughing. So he said, Dad, what's going on? Shmuel said to him, why are you crying? He replied, because you will soon be coming here to join me. In other words, you will die soon. Shmuel then said to him, why are you laughing? To which his father replied, because you are highly regarded in this world, in the world of the living. So in other words, I know in heaven how highly regarded you are in the world below. And that's why I'm laughing, because I'm happy. Shmuel said to his father, if I am so highly regarded, if I'm such an important personality, then I'd like to call in a favor. Then let them admit Levi to the Heavenly Academy on my account. So they admitted Levi. Shmuel then asked his father, where is the orphan's money? He replied, go take it from inside the bedstone of the mill. I don't know what a bedstone is, but I imagine that a mill has something called a bedstone, and it's inside of it. Okay? The money on top and on bottom is ours, while the money in the middle belongs to the orphans. So I guess it was kind of buried somewhere. And the money above and the money below was privately owned. The middle money, that was the orphan's money. Shmuel said to him, why did you place the money in this funny way? He replied, so if robbers would steal any of the money from on top, they would steal it. For which money would they steal? My money, not the orphan's money, since our money's on top. And should the damaging effects of the ground destroy some of the money, maybe it gets rotten or decomposed, it would first destroy ours, since our money's on the bottom touching the ground. The Gemara concludes, apparently, since Shmuel's father knew how highly Shmuel was regarded in this world, from here we know that the dead do know of earthly affairs. Right? Isn't that interesting? So from here, the Talmud derives a proof that the deceased are aware of what goes on in this world. Let's go a little bit deeper into understanding what happened to Levi over here. You know, like where did Levi go wrong? In the sense that he was excluded from the Heavenly Academy, but just because he sat outside of the lectures of Rabbi Ephes in order to keep his rabbi, Rabbi Hanina Bar Chama, company. Right, what's going on over here? Just before, I want to see the comment coming in. Oh, Ed Hockman is with us as well on YouTube. And Elaine, it is said at a funeral that the deceased cannot reciprocate the mitzvah of burial. If they are aware of what they can, of what we can do, if they are aware of what we can do, they cannot reciprocate through Torah study. Elaine, I'm sorry, but I don't understand the question. So the deceased cannot reciprocate the mitzvah of burial, correct? When we bury them, they cannot repay us the favor. So I don't understand the second half of your sentence. You're missing a couple words there. If they are aware of what we can do, they cannot reciprocate through Torah study. How would their Torah study? In other words, are you saying that their Torah study should be in our merit? Maybe that's what you're saying. That they can study Torah in our merit. I think that's the question, right? If that is the question. Then the answer is like this. That only in this world we struggle with good and bad. Only in this world we struggle with ego and self-centeredness versus purpose and our mission. So therefore, only in this world is a mitzvah of any value. But in heaven, it is the natural desire of all souls is to study Torah. And to do the right thing. In fact, you only study Torah in the next world vis-a-vis what you studied in this world. So in other words, you can't just get access into the highest echelons. You can't go straight to Harvard, the Harvard version of yeshiva upstairs, if you spent your whole life in the casino here, right? Based upon what you studied in this world is the kind of Torah study that you study in the next world. Ashrei misha balakan v'talmudei biyadei. Praised is he who comes into this world, into the next world, with his Talmud in his hand, which is one of the reasons that you study a lot in this world. I mean, besides the fact that it's a great mitzvah to study a lot in this world, but what you study in this world is where you reach in the next world, right? You're not granted access to the penthouse suite, right? If you're, if you spent your whole life in the basement, right? That's where you're, it's all, right? So in other words, the Torah study that the souls do in the next world is not a merit as much as it is a preoccupation. In this world, when you got out of bed early and you came to daven, that's an achievement. When you're studying Torah, when you could be watching TV and just turning your brain off and doing nothing by binge watching an entire series on Netflix for like a whole week. You can literally turn your brain off for a whole week and just vegetate in front of the TV, right? Instead, you're studying Torah, which actually takes effort, right? Then what happens? There you get merit. But studying Torah in the next world doesn't really give you merit to give to the people in this world. Mickey's telling us what a bedstone is. A bedstone is the bottom stone in the mill on which the millstone turns. So I guess you have two stones, one stone and a stone on top, and the top stone turns. I think you put the seeds inside the middle stone and it falls and they come out of the side. So it crushes them between the two stones. So I guess a ground stone. Okay, got it. Very good, Mick. Thank you very much. It's a large foundation stone. Okay, good. So let's go a little bit deeper into understanding what Levi did wrong. What was the problem with what Levi did over here, right? What did Levi do wrong? It appears that his error was exceedingly slight. Rabbi Yehuda Leib Chasman notes that in principle, Levi was prepared to sit before Rabbi Ephes and accept him as his new master. It was only Rabbi Levi's concern for Rabbi Chanina's honor that caused him to remain outside. This was not a baseless consideration, for Rabbi Chanina himself was evidently justified in refusing to subordinate himself to Rabbi Ephes. Levi, however, was faulted for ignoring the effect his conduct might have on Rabbi Ephes's feelings. And for this slight offense, Levi was excommunicated from the Heavenly Academy for 2.5 years, a sentence that undoubtedly subjected him to considerable humiliation. Interesting. So, doesn't that show you how careful you have to be with hurting other people's feelings? I'm getting there. But think about that for a moment. Every person that you meet is fighting a battle that you know nothing about. Just think about that. Be kind. Because even the slightest action could cause untold hurt to another person. And though you might not see the consequences of that in this world, you certainly will see the consequences in the next world. And it's fascinating for us to get this insight into the next world here in the Talmud. Let's keep on going. How exacting is the judgment of heaven? How demanding are Hashem's expectations of the righteous? It's so demanding, right? Rabbi Yaakov Moshe Lesson makes a different point. Rabbi Ephes is a Torah giant who presumably had spent a lifetime perfecting his character traits. Typically, such outstanding personalities are utterly unconcerned with their own honor and ego and are oblivious to the question of whether others respect them or fail to respect them. It is told that Rabbi Yisrael Salanter reached the vaunted level of hishtavus, of equability, complete indifference to his honor or dishonor. Rabbi Yisrael Salanter was so absorbed in the richness of his life as a servant of Hashem and as a servant of his people that the way people treated him held not a whit of significance. If this was true of a latter-day sage like Rabbi Yisrael Salanter of the 1800s, it is certainly true of Rabbi Ephes, one of Rebbe's great disciples of 2,000 years ago. So what's going on? Why would Rabbi Ephes's feelings have been hurt if he had potentially probably reached the level of equability? Let us ask ourselves then, did Rabbi Ephes take umbrage at Levi's decision to remain outside in Rabbi Chanina's company? In light of the above, it seems unlikely that he took notice of Levi's attitude towards his appointment as head of the academy. We must therefore conclude that the divine complaint against Levi was that he should have taken Rabbi Ephes's feelings into account as if he were susceptible to being offended. This idea is rooted in a great paradox in the Torah's guidelines for interpersonal relations. While a Jew is encouraged to shun honor and to be impervious to insult and emotional injury, he is enjoined at the same time to treat other people, even the greatest of people, as if they were sensitive to the minutest slight to their honor. So in other words, even though you yourself should be shunning honor, you should be treating everybody else with great sensitivity. Indeed, the Alter of Slobodka remarked that one must honor his fellow Jew as if the latter were Mordechai, the celebrated head of the Sanhedrin, but this should not lead him to conclude that just as Mordechai certainly did not care about his personal honor, so this fellow Jew does not need much attention paid to his honor. On the contrary, one must treat his fellow Jew as if he were Haman, who was so particular about his honor that he declared all of his wealth, power, and glory as imperial viceroy to be worthless in the face of one Jew's refusal to join the crowds bowing down before him, and who considered this sufficient reason to wipe out the entire Jewish people. So Haman was so concerned about his own ego that even when Mordechai, one person, didn't bow down to him, he said, everything I've ever earned is valueless in my eyes. So Haman was, on the one hand, very exacting about his own ego, but Mordechai was the head of the celebrated head of the Sanhedrin. So we should honor Mordechai. We should honor your fellow Jew as if he's the celebrated head of the Sanhedrin. And you should be respectful of him as if he is as sensitive as Haman is. Sorry, Keith, what were you going to say?
My question is going back a second. So Rabbi Ganim.
Well, let me just wrap it up. One second. So this was Levi's mistake. As counterintuitive as it may be, he was punished for treating Rabbi Ephes as the pure-minded Mordechai. But really he was, which he really was, rather than as the honor-starved and insecure Haman, which he certainly was not. So the mistake of Levi would have been that he wasn't as sensitive as he should have been to the feelings of a fellow Jew. Now, I just want to say, Keith, that just before your point of your question, I just want to say that we have to be extremely careful with the feelings of another person, okay? Don't be generous with the feelings of another person. Say, yeah, he probably doesn't care. No. He probably does care. All people are people. Even rabbis are people, by the way. You know that, right? Rabbis are also people. Rabbis make mistakes. Rabbis have sensitive feelings as well, right? And we have to be respectful of every single human being, right? I think in order to be a good rabbi, you got to develop a very thick skin, because if you're going to be thin-skinned, you're probably not going to last too long on this job, because it gets quite challenging, right? But at the same time, we should be respectful of every other person. At the very least, treat someone else as you yourself want to be treated. Right? The golden rule. Go ahead.
Actually, I was going off on a tangent.
Go ahead. No, go back. No, it's okay. Go.
Well, the first rabbi said he was too big to learn from the other rabbi. You know, it's interesting. We don't talk about him. We talk about Levi did wrong. He should have. I understand that part. The first rabbi felt that he was too big to learn from the other rabbi.
There was always politics in the study hall.
I just find it interesting that we can go off on that tangent.
Look, maybe they had a sharp disagreement of ideas. They might that does happen. That one rabbi feels that another rabbi is just not anything he wants to learn from, because his positions are too lenient or too stringent. Right? When you look at Democrats and Republicans, we have a very hard time talking to each other. Why? Because the Democrats might be too left-leaning, the Republicans might be too right-leaning, right? For each other's taste. And the same thing goes with Torah scholars as well. If you're too much into the social justice, or too much or too out of touch with with people on the ground, maybe, then
some people would want to follow one rabbi and not another.
Yeah, exactly. And we see that all the time. I mean, there's nothing new about that.
Levi decided he wanted, but he wasn't studying with the other rabbi. He would follow that other rabbi.
I guess he did. He stood outside with him. I probably would have done the same thing, because if I saw a great rabbi that was sitting outside, I'd take advantage of the opportunity to just have a private conversation with him on the outside instead of sitting with him in the class on the inside. Right? Maybe, who knows? But nevertheless, what we do learn from here is some very, very interesting and beautiful lessons we learn here. And they are as follows. First of all, obviously in the context of the Talmud, we've learned today about what goes on in the next world. We've learned about money stories, that people in the next world, they remember where they left the money. We also learned don't make a mistake of not sharing your passwords with your loved ones before you die. Right? Let them know where everything is. Right? Right? Don't leave them to start searching now. Some sort of a epic hide and seek. You write a will. That's what it says. Write a will. Put it all in the will. Right? By the way, when you do a will, you should include a halachic will as well. Halachic will means end of life according to Jewish law. If you want it done properly, then you should make sure that they don't pull the plug on you, God forbid, but that you appoint your rabbi to be the one to be involved in the decision of end of life, right? today the way it works in hospitals is like they need the bed. So they're like, listen, the guy doesn't have much of a chance. Okay, let's just expedite. Send him off to hospice. You know what I mean? Send him off and then just like make it go away. So that's not a Jewish way of dealing with human life. So you should, when you write your will, I highly encourage you to write a halachic will. Incorporate within it a few paragraphs, which are the halachic will. You can find them on Chabad.org. Just go to Chabad.org and search halachic will, and you'll find it over there. By the way, when you do that, please, if you could try to remember the Jewish community for a Jewish legacy as well. If you can remember to leave a small percentage of your estate to the Jewish community, to leave behind a Jewish legacy. This is a beautiful thing, to leave something, there's no coffins and luggage racks. So as much as generous as you're feeling, if you could leave behind a Jewish legacy for you after you die, that's a beautiful thing as well. And you can get all that information to share with your lawyer on our website. It's at jewishgardens.com/legacy. That's jewishgardens.com/legacy, where you can leave behind a legacy to the Jewish community. And imagine getting up to heaven and finding out that, they're building something beautiful for you. And also for end of life, I want to also encourage you to consider making the end of life decisions now, not before it's too late, which is to make sure that you have a proper burial plot. Unlike the woman that was buried in a sea of, in a bed of reeds, to be buried in a proper Jewish cemetery, we have our own Chabad Palm Beach Gardens Jewish cemetery right here in Palm Beach Gardens. And while there's still spaces available, we encourage you to find out more about it. You can call the office here to find out how to learn more about your plot in the Jewish cemetery, in the halachic kosher cemetery, to make sure you're buried in the right way, because we learn in this Talmud that if you're not buried in the right way, you got all sorts of problems. Feel free to discuss that with me. I'd be happy to chat with you about any of these topics. Rabbi@jewishgardens.com is my email. That's rabbi@jewishgardens.com to talk to me about any of these things. Of course, today we are elevating the soul of Max Marmer in heaven, and so appropriate what we learned today in the Talmud about all about the next world. So, and also how appropriate that Stephanie and Jay are the chairs of our memorial committee, which oversees the Jewish cemetery. And it's on this occasion that we learn about the yahrzeit, that we learn about what happens in the next world, and we're dedicating this Torah study today to the next world, which is all about the memorial committee. Let's make a memorial for Zalman Mordechai ben Ari Leib. Max Marmer, Sholach Lelamai Babur, Shanad with Sadaka, Badas Koras Nishmasai, Reganade, and Demanoka, Sailachin Badaracham, Mastery, Abasisar, Nafaf Lelami, Vitrora, Vitrorachim, Nishmas, and the Yunachalos, Savianochal Mishkava, Bishalim, Venemar. Amen. As we conclude today, friends, don't forget tonight we have a very special Zoom event, Windows to the World. It's called The Journey to Judaism, tonight at 7 p.m. with a Chinese girl from Western China and an Italian Catholic boy who on their own find their way to Judaism, and they get married and living today in London, England. A beautiful story, a story of love, spiritual and romantic love, which is spanning across continents. And that's happening tonight on Zoom at jewishgardens.com/Zoom at 7 p.m. Join us from wherever you are in the world. We'd love to have you. And with that, I'm going to wish everybody a good day. Shalom, and thank you for joining me here today. Yes, Winston, 7 p.m. is Windows to the World tonight.